Well, the most recent arena on Tuesday, I got really agitated with my family. I was like, I can't be around you guys because they bicker a lot. And they bicker a lot and they leave a mess out a lot. And no matter what I say, it keeps happening, right? Like dishes put in the dishwasher the way that I don't think it's as efficient, and they can't clean all the dishes. They cook and they leave crumbs and a mess and oil spilled everywhere on the stove. And then they're bickering at each other. Um, and then so I'm like, I can't take this. And I move all my stuff down to my office. I'm like, I'm sleeping down here. And then I'm sitting down there and I go out for this long walk. And then I realize walking is just so great. It's just this great way of just like just moving the energy. And I was like, oh, I'm creating all of this. It just kind of popped in as I was walking. And it was like, not only am I creating all of this, there's a part of me that was expecting this. And I was like, oh, that's just like my mom. I'm like recreating the exact same expectation and scenario as my mom. I was like, what if that's not true? What if it's completely different? And I just
Can
kind of
I
stepped
can
back.
I like can I put can I sorry, this is a magnifying glass. Can I put a
Yeah.
magnifying glass on what you're saying? So when you say you're creating it, can you tell me exactly what you like, how are you creating it? Do you know?
I mean, most of it has been this unconscious creation that I think I just took on. Like my mother used to complain all the time how she does all the work in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this moment where I just popped out and I saw that I was generating this similar perspective on what was happening. And just that moment, I kind of stepped back and I said, what if that's not what's happening at all?
Got it. So what you're saying when you're using the word create, it's like your perception, like because you're perceiving it, because you're perceiving that you do all the housework and that they are messy in these ways, you're creating that you're doing all the housework and they're
Yeah, I'm
messy in these
creating
ways.
the viewpoint, the perspective.
Mhm, mhm. And then when you shifted the perspective, then what happened?
So once I realized this was being sourced from me, there was just a space where I was just, what else could be here? And then the first thing I saw was, oh, I'm generating this story like my mother used to generate. And then from there, I kind of just took another beat. And then I said, what if that's not what's happening at all? And then this story popped in of what if this is all happening for me to see what I'm creating. And then from there, it was this kind of delight of, oh, this is all a universal classroom. This is all happening for me. Like, how cool is that? How cool is that? I'm like this. And then I was like, well, I could be anything I want. I'm like this spiritual love warrior who's like looking to burn through her projections. So what if everything that they're doing is what I'm doing? If everything is projection. And I was like looking and finding the places at me where I bicker, where I because they were bickering and it looked like they were just like pulling back and forth. So I was like, where do I do that? Where do I power struggle, pull back
Mm,
and forth? Where am I lazy and reliant on other people? And I could
mm,
find tons of evidence.
mm.
So it just started just creating more and more and more space. And then I started getting just kind of feeling amused. So like things like that is just, I mean, that story was probably running for, I've been married for almost 17 years now. So it's been running for like 17 years. So, but it was so palpably shifted and how it was all set up just for me.
I love the intersection here of, in in the mind light work, we talk a lot, we have distinctions between trauma work and human potential, but as trainers, we know that it ends up being the same. It's not, it's like it all happens in the same house, the house of the psyche, the house of the emotions. And what I really like about this conversation is the way that like context, the context, an empowering context, like a view, a perspective of self or a perspective of reality that has you feel at the source of things, experience yourself at the source of things, has um it's like the tools appear. Like first you say like, okay, I'm the creator of my experience. I declare that I'm the creator of my experience. And then it's almost like the things that you would need to create what you're creating then appear in your hands. Like, oh, here's the perception of my mom. And then, and you didn't even know you were holding them until you kind of go meta in that way. And then you realize like, oh, I'm holding this and I'm holding this and I'm doing something versus it, that perception of like, this is happening to me, this is happening at me, I have to survive this. And it's like that zooming, that, yeah, it's like a going meta, going zooming out and realizing, oh, I'm like, my hands are on a steering wheel right now, I'm driving something. And then this is like what we, you know, what we call trauma work, like the integration of like, oh, I'm holding this, I'm projecting this. And then the opportunity to see what's fragmented internally that would have those things be valuable to look at. Like, why would you project disdain for bickering? Like, why would one project that? Why would you choose to see it that way? And then you like the natural conclusion to go, well, I would see it that way, given that I'm only doing everything for my own benefit and my own spiritual evolution. I would see it that way in order to better understand that I have a dynamic of that going on internally and that I'm actually in resistance to an internal bickering. And because I set this beautiful scene up for myself of my family bickering, I can see bickering. Internally, I couldn't see bickering, but externally, I can see it. And then now with this meta view, where I can see that I set that up, then I can see I set it up for my benefit to play out something I've got going on internally. I can create harmony internally, and then that will inevitably create harmony externally. Maybe I don't care anymore if they are bickering, or maybe they were never bickering. We don't know. You kind of don't know what's actually happening out there until that gets cleaned up. Or maybe they were bickering, but it was actually my vibration that was somehow like provoking it unbeknownst to myself.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's just being in a place where needing my world to change so that I'm okay, or needing
Yeah.
people to change so that I'm okay, is just so clearly these days one of the most disempowering places to be.
Mm,
And that what it's like, what do I want instead? Well,
mm,
what I want instead, whether they change or not, is that I am completely in peace and seeing them with these loving eyes, regardless of what they seem to be doing.
mm.
Like, I stay grounded.
Yeah. What I love about the process that we just went through is that I think that we, at least in our circles, like the people that we study with um and mostly live with also, it's sort of like a given, like, okay, yeah, we're creating our own reality, or I set this up, or I'm generating this. But then a lot of times we experience this divide between with what we know and how we're living, because the mechanisms by which we're doing it are invisible. So it's like, yeah, I create my own reality, but I don't really get how I'm doing it. And I love Abraham Hicks so much, but I think the benefit of having human teachers with endocrine systems and um, you know, our full biology is like to be able to understand a little bit better what's actually happening in the body, that when you have an internal, when you have trauma, when you have an internal divide, you the instinct, the physiological instinct is to protect yourself from it. You're and one of the ways that we protect ourselves from our internal monsters is to project them externally. And then we have an external monster that we have to protect ourselves from. And so like understanding um how we lose sight of that meta position where you can see you're holding the tools and you're doing it on purpose for a grand and generous purpose internally. Yeah, I just think it's really useful to actually break it down in this way and sort of deconstruct how something like this is being created.
No, totally. I hear every day people having these awesome insights about how they're creating this or that, but then they can't do anything about it. And
Mhm.
I think that's why trauma work is, at least for me, has been so pivotal. Like, I don't know how I
Mhm.
would have, but like as I was on my walk, I found the energy in my body and I just kind of did some sort of mindful focusing and just metabolized it. And
Mhm.
once the energy wasn't running the image and the story, it just fell down. Just, it was like the whole thing just fell and it was gone.
Yeah,
But like,
collapsed.
yeah, and for years I spent time trying to just mentally do it. Like,
Mhm.
okay, this is a different story. But until I learned how to actually metabolize the energy, integrate it, just dissolve knots, however you
Yeah.
want to say it, like it didn't change very quickly. It was very excruciatingly slow and sometimes not at all.
Yeah.
So,
Man, I have a story on this theme also. I very similar things like my parent, my co-parent, the father of my kids, I live with him and he has really different values around cleanliness than I do. And I have twins that really enjoy fighting sometimes. Um, and I've shared with you about this over the years, in class. It's like one of the major themes that I've worked with. Um, and like I'm a little bit further from my breakthrough than what you're sharing right now that just happened on your walk. Like, and I had a moment where I was coming home. This is like a year, years after this work of like of dissolving these things. I was coming home from the airport and I was texting Bobby, my co-parent, like, hey, I'm on my way home. And he was like, oh, I didn't clean the house. I thought you were going to be home later. And I was like, oh, it's fine. Like, it'll be fine. Thanks for giving me the heads up. And and then as I'm driving in my Lyft, I see him pull in, like he came home from work to tidy up the house for me because he was so committed that I walk in from my trip to a clean home.
amazing.
And I like my energy around it was, and I was sharing with the Lyft driver, I was like, I think that that's my roommate. I think that's my co-parent driving home, like trying to beat me home. Like, isn't that sweet? And I'm like talking with the Lyft driver about like, isn't this incredible that this is my life, that this is my partnership, that he like I'm fine, but he is it's so important to him that this standard be upheld, that like who he is in my life, what kind of home I live in, like he's committed to it. So incredible. So incredible. And similarly, I had this experience with my kiddos where I have an agreement with them now that they're 13 years old, um, that they don't fight in my physical presence because it's scary to me. Like two people that I love are being harmed, and I'm not really physically in a position to do anything about it anymore. Like they're not 3 years old. I'm not going to just like scoop them up. I could, if I came between them, I would be hurt. And so it's a new dynamic. They're little men, and they're in the car and they're so exhausted, they're super jet lagged, and they're really wanting to fight. Like they have this anger inside of themselves, and they have whatever contract they have between them, that like they're allowed to take their anger out on each other. That's like still normal in their dynamic. And I'm like, I can feel it. And I'm like, first I'm like starting to verbally, like, can I come between the fight verbally? And it's like, no, there's way too much momentum. They're really committed. They're gonna fight. So I pull over and I get out of the car and I'm like, I'll be ready when y'all are. and and I can feel my own tension around it, and it's like, and then I'm like, wow, what a pretty field. And then I'm like, I wonder what my friend's doing. And I like call my friend. I'm like just telling her like I'm on my way home, and then I get off the phone, and it's been maybe like 3 minutes. I get in the car, they're both totally silent, and one of them's asleep. Like, it took, like, no time between when I disengaged my energy for them to do whatever they needed to do, and then again, like what you're saying, just, like, real-time collapse.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's cool to see that, like, I think a lot of times when we're doing our inner work, in order to better navigate the mundane aspects of our life, it's sort of, especially in the beginning, before you feel the joy and exhilaration of, like, communion with God and communion with yourself through the process, it's a little bit like, why do I have to do all the work? And it's like not until you get all the way on the other side of like feeling like it's some kind of generous, benevolent act for you to clean up your shit on a topic, to feel like the joy of it. And then you're not doing any of the work. Like I didn't do any of the work to have my children settle into a car for a long road trip when they're really prickly in total peace. I did none of the work. It just got out of the way.
Hmm. That really lands that part about at first you're doing all the work, but then you're doing none of the work.
Mhm.
I feel like that's the kind of thing though that I don't know, kind of like Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. It's like he's telling Daniel-san to wax on and wax off and do the work and paint
Mhm.
the fence and sand the floor and then it just he doesn't get it until he gets it later.
Yeah.
Like and then it's like, "Oh, this was all for something." And
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I think that what I'm hearing and what you're saying is just like this snippets and impressions of just like being coachable or doing the work or like surrendering into that there's something on the other side
Yeah.
and then speaking from that place of having done that, which I think
Yeah.
is really incredible.
There's a few kind of key moments that I'm curious about with you on this topic. Um, so I would say that a turning point for me where it stops, like that narrative fully disappears, is when personal work intersects with spirituality, and it's not like I'm like working on myself to like be better. It's getting I'm I'm letting go of whatever's in the way of my true self. I'm letting go of whatever's in the way that would prevent me from being in love. I'm letting go of whatever might be in the way, whatever I'm holding in the way, because it is kind of an active holding of being able to feel the presence of love and God in my life. And the transition from thinking about it like I'm trying to solve a problem with problematic people in problematic circumstances to I'm trying to connect with God. I'm trying to connect with myself. I'm trying to connect with love. That's what the setup is. To me, that's the major transition that had me go from feeling resentful about my personal work to feeling like happy, happy to be the privileged one to let this go, to let the kids do whatever they're needing to do to find peace, like just joyful in it. But I also recognize that there was a lot of trauma work that I did. Well, is this true? Well, actually, I think always my trauma work was a pursuit of God, that it was always a pursuit of feeling connected to myself. Because a lot of my trauma work I did before I had a family. I didn't really have anybody to drive me crazy. that I couldn't just walk away from. What about for you? Do you feel like you needed to do a certain amount of detangling of yourself before you had the larger context of what you were doing it for?
Um, I first went to Landmark. I think I was 24, and I saw what was possible. You know how in okay, so in Landmark, I know you've been there, but for anyone else who hasn't heard, but like in Landmark, there's always like hundreds of people, and there's always people sharing about their breakthroughs. That's what they call them. So I would hear just person after person sharing these incredible stories of how it was one way and then it was radically different. I mean,
Yeah.
miraculous, incredible things that felt impossible. So what drew me first to doing the work was this knowing that something extraordinary was possible.
Mm,
And then, of course, as I'm doing it, I hit up against all the roadblocks, mainly people, myself, my own feelings, and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I would say that I would fall off the wagon a lot. And so
well, it's
that's
also
when,
skills. It's also skills, right? Like it's easy to fall off the wagon when you've got a particular knot that you don't have the tool that's going to help you untie this one.
that is so true. Like right now, if I knew back then what I knew now, like any knot that comes up, I can untie within pretty much a day to a few days, no matter how
Yeah.
big the knot is. But back
Yeah.
then, all I had was language, the tools of language and context and perspective. So yeah, I fell off the wagon a lot. And in those moments where I fell off, I would say, why am I the only one doing this? And I hear that from clients all the time, and now I just kind of find it funny.
Yeah.
People, clients, and it's like, well, the only reason why I have to do all this is because I'm the one who's reaching for that extraordinary. That I know that there's something there that I wanted. I'm the one who, like, if I wasn't doing it, I'd be going against what I deeply know to be true
Yeah.
and what I deeply yearn for. So I can sit there and say that that other people need to be doing their work too. But ultimately, like what I really know is that there's no other possible thing I could be doing. And this
Yeah.
is the work, this is the training, the healing, all of it to get to that extraordinary something that I, felt and got a whiff of when I was 24.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I guess my introduction is similar, but I felt as a kid that something else was possible. I had an intuition or a knowing that the reason why my less savory aspects of my childhood hurt me in the way that they did is because I had a value of something better. Like there was an ideal, and even with like world issues, like when I discovered that there was a war, for example, I remember it super well, seeing the war in Kosovo on the TV and thinking like, wait, we still have war? Like, I thought I thought that was like dragons and fairies stuff. Like we go to battle against each other, and just seeing the adults like, wait, y'all don't have this handled? Like because when you're young, it's so in everyone's voice, like how one should behave and how like the ideals, are shared to children. And so the fact that we weren't living those ideals, um, it broke my heart. And I knew it broke my heart because I knew something better was possible. And I think that is what spurred my longing to understand how to do psychological spiritual healing. Um, but my first experience was with tapping. I learned tap to tap before I learned EFT before I went to the Landmark Forum. It was like a year back to back. I was 18, and I was working on a breakup, and the pain was just gone. It was just gone. It was 30 minutes of tapping, and I'd been in this relationship for 4 years. And then I just didn't have any pain anymore. Um, and so that was like, oh, something's possible. And like you're saying, it's like there are so many different modalities that are so great. But I feel like until you know enough of them, it's hard to see that there's actually a way to get out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to break any pattern. And you could say that it's all the same way. I know that you know, like what we teach at Mindlight is kind of that there are these foundational principles, but I know in reality, like you have to have a lot of skill in order to be able to really dissolve anything. Um, like I mean, you share this with me all the time. Like you're learning a new technique and it's the new best thing, and it's like the thing that you're most excited about. But I know from being in class with you that the reason why that technique is the best technique that you've ever experienced is because of your evolution as a healer. It has nothing to do with that technique actually being the technique. It's that you have all of these techniques that make this technique more than it would be if this was the first one that you were learning. There's something about um, I think that as a culture, maybe we're underestimating the level of skill one needs in order to really move through our patterns and take responsibility for what it is that we're creating.
I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of, like, you and me here, right here in this moment, right now, there's so much here. So
Yeah.
like when I think we're working through our own stuff, people are bringing so much, and it may not be conscious. Like just until last week, I was realizing, this might sound funny, but just how there is no order of difficulty in healing.
Yeah.
And I heard those words before, but I didn't really embody those words. And then sometime last week, it just kind of clicked, like, there really isn't that much of a, like, there's not, it's like really all possible, but it's what I'm saying to myself and how much I'm believing that it's possible. And
Mhm.
when I just kind of flip that, I just had this sense of realizing that time, the amount of time things takes too, is just all constructed.
Mm.
So it's like bringing all of that, that I know, not just know intellectually, but embodied, that it's all possible and it doesn't have to be hard.
Mhm.
Like bringing that to a session is very different than, I don't know if I can do this. Am I doing this wrong? Or,
Mhm.
I'm identified with my pain. Who am I without my pain? Like when all that is gone, it's just a very different experience shows up to any technique, like you were saying.
Yeah,
And
but you're also talking about a kind of momentum that there's no degrees of like there's no degree of miracles. Um, and there's something about our training, our readiness for miracles. It's like it's easier to be ready um for a miracle that doesn't occur like a miracle that you don't think is a miracle. Like the miracle of finding my purse. You know, I lost my purse and like it would be a miracle to find it. I need it. I don't know where it is. I can't remember, but it's also like very feasible that I will find it to me. And that's like a readiness. And then, you know, if I find my purse, then I'm like, oh, like I have a little bit more belief in my capacity to work things out vibrationally or emotionally. And then let's say that like I don't know, like I have a conflict and I want to just disappear the conflict in my life with my own vibrational work. And I'm like, well, I know what it's like to slog through it the hard way. I know what it's like to try and like negotiate with the other person and make new agreements and then like some concept, like, you know, those kinds of like complicated structures and organization and relationship. But I just want to disappear it. What if I could do that? And then you build that confidence and then like your readiness for miracles increases by working with the degrees that your mind can deal with versus, you know, out the gate trying to instantaneously cure an incurable disease or something.
I think that's what's so great about doing classwork, is that you get to see things you've never experienced in other people. And if
Oh
enough
yeah.
people have that kind of experience, then it's like, well, if they can have it, why wouldn't I be able to have it? Like to me, curing an incurable disease is actually very believable. because I've seen it so many times, and
Yeah.
it's like, and then it's interesting. So I've seen it so many times, and my partner actually cured a 3-year severe prostate issue where he was
Mhm.
told he definitely had to have surgery, possibly like, cut off parts of himself. And then in 1 month, actually 6 weeks, in 6 weeks, he healed it when he finally started doing some of the healing work that I was nudging him to do. And so now it's like, well, yeah, of course,
Mhm. Are there areas for you personally that still feel like excluded? Like miracles
Nothing
aren't.
feels, well, nothing feels excluded, but do I have direct evidence in some of these areas? A little bit, and I'm like working on it being a lot of it, but in some places a lot of it. So,
Yeah.
but I do
Mhm.
have this one woman, she's in a group that I'm in where we often, do this kind of healing work together, and she says I'm so afraid of being disappointed that I can't allow myself to want it, to actually do the work. And that's actually,
Mhm.
something I hear pretty often.
Yeah.
So again, we talk about readiness, or that willingness to be vulnerable enough to be ready, or to
Yeah.
open our hearts to want something.
Yeah.
Like all that is in the invisible when we come and approach this thing, or maybe it's not in the invisible, but a lot of times it's unconscious, like the depths of why we do what we're doing. And then when it's brought to light, like so much more can be done.
Yeah, that takes me back to where you started this moment of realization, like everything is in my favor. Everything I'm doing, like even when I'm creating harm for myself, I'm doing it for my benefit. That context is so powerful. And when I think about this fear, which I agree, it's a very common fear, um, of wanting something and then failing to have it. And I use that language specifically because it occurs like a failure, and it affects our self-image and our self-esteem when we want a thing and then we don't get it. And it's, oh, it like I can feel it in my heart, that experience of like wish, like having our wishes, um it's like it's a heartbreak to have a wish go unfulfilled. And it takes us to, I think, some of our most common and foundational traumas as a society. That's the question, what's wrong with me? Like, I want this thing, like I have this vision for this thing in my heart. What's wrong with me? And it's sort of the polar opposite of this context that allowed you to totally transform your experience of your family in a matter of minutes. It's like how it's like being being the victim of your circumstances in such a way that you're um I don't know, it's like the exact it's the exact opposite. It's like this is happening to me and it's my fault that it's happening to me because
Mm.
there's something foundationally inherently wrong with me, versus I'm creating this on purpose for my benefit because I'm infinitely powerful and my nature is love. It's like total total collapse of both of those truths, that yes, I am creating it and I'm doing it for my benefit because I'm in love with myself and want my own expansion and evolution. So that I think that unearthing that, like daylighting that, and it does kind of take us back to a conversation that you and I have been having about this like original lie of separation, or this original lie that there is something deficient in our nature that would have us not get what we want, that would have us deserving of suffering, that would have us unable to fulfill our own wishes or solve our problems.
That reminds me of that book you recommended to me, The Pathwork of Life, Self-Transformation.
Yeah,
They were just talking about that, about the idealized self, and
yeah,
how we form it when we're so young that it's really unconscious. But some of the signs that we have this, like they call it either a mask or the idealized self, is that we feel bummed every time we can't live up to its expectations, this perfect version of us that we think we're supposed to be in
Yeah.
order to be whole, be loved, survive, be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me feel like walking through this a little bit, what it is to want something and how to relate around the wanting of it when it hasn't yet manifested, whether it's wanting your family to have more harmony and organization, or wanting to heal something, or wanting, you know, more money, or wanting a lover, um, wanting the fruit trees to bloom, to fruit, whatever it is that you're desiring, how we relate to it from such a punishing way, um, and how could we reverse engineer that? How do you reverse engineer, I want a thing and I don't have it yet. What's wrong with me? Where do you start?
Where have you started?
I think hearing the lie is really important. Hearing the lie of what's wrong with me, or the answers to that, like um I'm fundamentally flawed from my childhood. Um I'm not smart enough, or I wasn't born into the right family, or um, I think a lot of it does end up coming from childhood, those lies, the things that you feel like if you had, then you would be able to. Um, but that also means like how our awareness of how our childhood has affected our self-esteem. Like if I had a better childhood, I would like myself more, and then I would be able to do this vibrational work or emotional work more effectively. Um, so I think that hearing the lie is important, um, as a first step.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And just also, I think, at least like realizing that we're not this identity or this constructed self concept, getting a little bit of space
Mm.
from like, oh, like if I had been born in a different country with a different family, different set of circumstances, would this identity be the same?
Mm.
Likely not. And if it
Mhm.
wasn't the same, am I still me?
Mm.
So it's just like really, standing in that place that we are the awareness of this identity. We're not the identity or the feelings that spring up or the thoughts or the beliefs, like really positioning ourselves from a more of a, zoomed out perspective of what's really going on. We're watching this identity and having feelings and then believing that those feelings must mean something about us.
I love that. And where that takes me next is that from that zoomed out place of kind of deconstructing our identity, or deconstructing what we believe is possible, even deconstructing our beliefs, then we can start to form beliefs that are more in our favor, that are
Totally.
more true to those direct experiences. When you actually do that process and you like, well, this sounds like it could be false, this could be a lie, and then it's like, all right, maybe this whole idea that I have any limitations based off of personality, life story, whatever, is a lie, because maybe I'm something much bigger. And then the inquiry of what is that, and if you can form some ideas around what that is, like, well, I'm life force, I'm I'm immortal, I'm part of something much bigger, and you kind of work with your own mythologies and your direct experience. What do you experience yourself as when you let go of your identity? And you get maybe some positive constructs to work with. And they may still be constructs, but they're constructs that are a little closer to your truth of what you are. Something that's a little more loving, a little kinder, um, and a little bit more in alignment with your spiritual beliefs. Like, I'm a child of God. I'm made of love. I am meant to be here. I I am blessed to be alive. These kinds of notions. I'm here for a purpose. I'm here for a reason. The inspirations and desires of my heart aren't an accident. They're part of my purpose. And then from that really zoomed out place, you can start to maybe come back into the thing that it is that you're wanting, with a very different perspective. Like, oh, I don't have this because something's wrong with me, versus I want this because I'm alive, and what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, what's funny too is like our subconscious. I was just recently in this course last year on the subconscious, and it was talking about how it can process 11 million bits of information per second or something. I don't know if I have the right number, versus the conscious mind, which is 40 bits of information per, I think it was seconds. So
Mm,
it kind of puts into perspective this, like how they talk about thinking your way out of a thing,
yeah.
and just like how much more limiting that can be. And then
Mhm.
just like these simple things, like with Byron Katie, just like onboarding the subconscious mind, just like, is what
Yeah.
I'm saying about myself, is it absolutely true? And then just not thinking, but just stepping back and being quiet and
Yeah.
watching the subconscious as it reorganizes. And it does. Like I've done this tons of times. We do it in our human potential class, and
Yeah.
you just kind of create a space and just wait, and then it will do it for you. And it's pretty amazing how it softens the old story.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, well, what's coming up in me as we're talking and we're spending a lot of time in this, like, in the zoomed out place. And I think one of the traps that we experience when we're trying to shift how we relate to something that we want and don't yet have is the desire to get back to it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I meditated for 10 minutes. Like, has it manifested yet? Or like, am I enlightened on this subject now? Like, how is my perspective different? And that urgency to get back to the manifested version of it cuts us off from being in the place where the problem doesn't even exist anymore, and it's a joyful moment to be wanting something that you don't actually have yet. It's an exhilarating moment. um, But I'm curious, like, I know you were kind of in mid thought, so continue your thought for sure. But next, I'm curious if you have anything about, um, it's like when you are exiting your process and you're coming back into contact from a new perspective, if you have, yeah, just speaking to that part of the step. Because, like, as I was sharing in the beginning of our conversation, this is an area that I'm working on right now, like, where when life is really demanding that I focus on it and
Mm-hmm.
that I pay attention and do things, um, how to re-enter the the matrix, the video game, whatever we want to call it, the playground, the schoolroom, um, of physical life. Yeah, how to re-enter.
Yeah, like we were saying before, human potential and trauma work, it's really both. It's not
Yeah.
either or, and it's both. And I feel like in my experience, like I have to interweave them, because those survival responses in the body, there is quite a bit of energy in them.
Mm,
So like for me, for example, in the morning, I do my meditation, and that's when I'm in that zoomed out place. And then throughout the day, I don't always have time to go back into that zoomed out place. And that's when little tools like asking myself if something's true, is there a split desire? And then doing like some quick like brain spotting or mindful focusing completely dissolves the energy that's creating that
mhm.
momentum that feels a lot stronger than the
Yeah.
momentum of this universal place. And it's not always like that. Sometimes the universal place is much more strong, and I can like hold that throughout the day. But
Yeah.
sometimes I have to go and like digest the meatball,
Yeah.
but it's
Um,
back and forth.
I just wanted to mention, because we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, different integration processes like EFT or using language. You mentioned brain spotting, you mentioned mindful focusing. And I just want to give just one quick example of what integration looks like. And pretty much it looks like this in every modality. It is the awareness of something that's out of balance or something you have resistance to, the awareness of, and you can be aware of it on many different levels. It may be that you're aware of it on a physiological level, you feel the tension in your body. It could be on an energetic level, like you can feel an energetic cloud or static or some kind of thing intuitively. It could be a story, it could be more intellectual, but having some kind of relationship with what it is that is not in alignment, that is not part of your truth, but having awareness of it from your truth. So sitting in the seat of well-being and being aware of that sensation,
Mm,
sitting in the seat of what you know to be true, who you know yourself to be, and being aware of, and then providing loving attention. So you're looking at it lovingly, you're looking at it kindly, you're offering, and again, it's going to be any level. It's like you can hold that in your body, a sensation of pleasure, and then offer that spaciousness, that breath, that softness, that relaxation to the sensation of tension in your stomach. Could be energetic, where you build yourself up in a very high positive way with breath work, and then you offer that to whatever you feel is static in your energy system. There's really so many different ways to come at it, but they all have that same principle: awareness of what's out of balance from the perspective of your own truth, from your own loving awareness, and then incorporating the body in some way, though that can become more and more subtle the more experienced you are.
I would just
um,
add on one more thing is
Okay.
just being willing to have it be different or to see it be
Mm,
different because
mm,
I think when we're not willing, that's, we're pretty powerful.
yeah.
If we want it to go away or to heal, but we're not actually willing for
Mhm.
things to change or for us to see it differently, I think that's also a key thing to hold.
That really brings up like a kind of a pain in the butt aspect of this, because what you're saying, like, absolutely, the willingness to let it go, but a lot of times what keeps us from the way that the willingness to let it go is thwarted is our unwillingness to allow it.
Mm, yeah,
So there's something
I'm
of,
glad you brought that up.
yeah, there's something of like a muscle that you just have to relax the muscle. That's it. And it, a lot of times the holding of that muscle looks like, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, I want it to go away, I don't want to feel this way anymore. Stupid husband, do the dishes, stupid kid, stop fighting, like resistance, resistance, resistance. And the willingness to have things change requires a relaxation around what you think it is, or how it's occurring in your body. That
Absolutely.
holding is holding, period. Resistance is resistance, period. If you have resistance in your body, if you're holding in your body, you're not allowing things to move. You're not allowing alignment.
And allowing it to just be there with
Hmm.
permission to begin with.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful.
I feel like that's such an important thing. And I often see the opposite, this kind of like, this shouldn't be here. And
Yeah,
starting from that place is, yeah, it's kind of like putting a rock in front of it.
yeah. So we've kind of gone over a process a few different times now. And I want to summarize it. It's what you described when you were talking about resolving that internal conflict regarding your family. It's same thing that, when I was sharing the same on my end, we talked about it from a meta perspective of how do we um, be with not having a wish fulfilled in a way that's not punishing and self-harming. Um, and it's all the same process. So what I heard was, first, it's understanding the lie. So in the case with your family, the lie is that they're doing something wrong and they need to do something different in order for you to feel different.
Mhm.
So being able to see the lie, see that something is being made up. There's some there's some lie that's being told internally. And very often the lie is about ourselves. What's wrong with me? To zoom out of that, from that questioning place, from that curious place, and question where that lie comes from. our understanding of our own identity, our understanding of our personalities, our potential, our resources, what's possible, to just get curious and question all of that from a very zoomed out perspective to see if we can get to a more true and fundamental understanding of ourselves. Then, from that more true and fundamental understanding of ourselves, if we can create some positive ideas, some positive self image, some positive regard for others, um, that feels more true to that deeper spiritual understanding of ourselves. And then, as we're coming back down to earth, where are having to, getting to have conversations again and getting to interact with whatever we had previously perceived as a problem, to have tools to work with our body's habits, to have tools for being able to meet the body's habit of fear, to meet the body's habit of resistance. And that fundamental tool is to be able to see it lovingly so that it can then dissolve.
And I want to
To
add
re-
on, in the beginning, feeling like we're doing all the work, and then
oh
after
yeah.
reaching, like, a certain place, realizing now we don't really have to do any work. And that's
Mm.
what all the work was for.
Yeah, really beautiful. That makes me think about something that occurred to me the other day. I was like, a lot of the law of attraction teachings are like, oh, it's so easy. Like just lean back and like it's so easy. And it's like anyone who's ever actually done personal development work, like that's such a big lie. I mean, it is so easy, and also like the amount of time that you're likely to fight with yourself before you experience the ease.
Mm.
I think that myth, it does a disservice because a lot of times we get off the wagon, as you were saying, because we're expecting something to be like, I spent 5 minutes thinking positively about a thing. Sure, I spent the other 23 hours and 55 minutes in my normal habit, but what's the problem? Like, I've been spending 5 minutes meditating every single day for an entire year and it still hasn't changed. Our expectations of how much intentionality we put into something to compensate for how much unintentionality
Hmm.
we put into things is, I think, skewed by those kinds of narratives in the personal development world that, oh yeah, it should be fast and easy. Learn how to do this in a weekend, learn how to do this 15 minutes a day, whatever. And what I think is more true is that the process in and of itself is rewarding, and that the things that we can experience in our lives and the depth of richness from those experience is just not possible any other way than through our own evolution, through our internal evolution. So it's like kind of redefining the carrot a little bit. If we're going to use a carrot to tempt ourselves into doing personal work, the carrot, um, if we think like, okay, well, I'm just going to disappear all my problems in 5 minutes of meditation, that is going to lose its power pretty quickly.